There are strange things done in the midnight sun.
Под полуночным солнцем происходят странные вещи.
By the men who moil for gold.
Людьми, которые ищут золото.
The Arctic trails have seen strange tales that would make your blood run cold.
На арктических тропах можно увидеть странные истории, от которых кровь застынет в жилах.
Had Robert Service lived west of the Bering Strait, the town of Oymyakon couldn't have failed to inspire him. Here, nestled in the Oymyakon River Valley, lies a freak of meteorology. The surrounding hills trap the cold winter air with no nearby ocean to provide a temperate breeze. As winter temperatures routinely plunge to minus 55, life goes on. Forget indoor plumbing, the pipes would freeze before you can say People magazine. The privy is there, out the back door and across the yard. Household water is delivered daily by a truck whose driver hacks a hole in the river each morning to fill the tank on his truck. Boil some of that water and throw a cupful in the air and watch it as it floats to earth as a spray of ice crystals. Kids are held back from school, but only when the temperature drops below minus 66. Welcome to the coldest inhabited place on Earth, the Siberia of Siberia. Yet humans survive here as they've done in the north for tens of thousands of years. What's their secret? Well, here they come now. And there they go. Tough, hardy, northern Spitz-Type dogs, from Siberian Huskies to Alaskan Malamutes, from Samoyeds to Chinooks. For thousands of generations, from Oymyakon to Tuktoyaktuk, northern dogs have meant the difference between life and death in some of the planet's harshest conditions. I'm Bud Bacone, and I can't feel my nose. Bundle up and meet the canine breeds of the North. We'll tag along with the Great Serum Run of 1925 and share some new insights into its 2-century-old legends, Togo and Balto. Okay now, mush!
Wait, Bud, did you mean mush?
What did I say?
What is a dog? How much is a dog worth?
The sport of dogs is one of the cleanest and best regulated of all the organized sports.
I am 50% setter, Irish setter.
Today, there is no question of the dog's place in society.
Isn't that so, Lassie?
Down and Back. Stories from the AKC archives.
This is the show for you.
With Bud Bacone.
This pup is more than a pal.
Zhukov Island, a 30-square-mile dot way up in the East Siberian Sea. From here, people in Siberia are all Southerners. It was on this island just 3 decades ago that archaeologists uncovered an ancient hunting site some 8,000 years old. No less remarkable was the discovery of domesticated canines, remnants of sledges, dog harnesses, and well-preserved dog bones. A science journal declared it the earliest known evidence of people putting dogs to work for any purpose. But even back then, the human-canine bond was certainly old news. The going theory is this. As the Ice Age wound down, our human ancestors and those of modern wolves found themselves in close quarters. Likely the wolves were attracted to food scraps near the camps. As the contact grew, some wolves underwent a genetic change and the canines became increasingly friendly towards humans, and over a millennium or 2 or 3, a bond formed. It's that partnership that helped both survive. For canines, it made good survival sense to partner up with the odd-smelling bipeds atop the food chain. It meant better security and a better food supply. Humans, on the other hand, gained formidable guardians, herders, and hunting partners. Oh, and on sub-zero nights, the single greatest foot warmers ever. Perhaps most importantly, dogs were the key to covering great distances. Hike! Across snow and ice. Because when your food supply is on the hoof, way the away from camp, and you're bringing home a dinner weighing 1,500 pounds, you're gonna want to ride. Tangible needs brought dogs and humans together, but it's intangibles that have bound us ever since. For canines, it's what scientists call a friendliness gene, prompting what some scientists call hypersociability. This desire to make peace, not war, separates them from their genetic cousins in the wolf pack. Researchers also believe that we humans are hardwired to be fond of dogs. What was so in Siberia was also so in modern-day Greenland, Alaska, and Nunavut. From Ellesmere Island back to Tuktoyaktuk. I hear you thinking, how did it spread across all that geography? Here, from about 225 miles above the North Pole, our shared cartographic bias becomes clear. Oh yes, the Arctic Circle is a big place, but as you look straight down on it from here, you can see the north of Alaska, Siberia, and Greenland are tucked much closer together than a flat paper Mac would have you think. Who knew? It's a small Arctic Circle after all. I sure hope I can expense this. Consider this archaeological site in southern Alaska where, just a few decades ago, a group of cavers had discovered bone fragments of an ancient bear. Except it wasn't. Tests on the fragment decades later revealed that it's more than 10,000 years old. It was a bone from the most ancient dog yet found in the Americas. In a cave not so far away were bone fragments of a human, also dating back 100 centuries, give or take a leap year. It added grist to the popular theory that canines and humans migrated together to this continent. Meanwhile, in Siberia, Greenland, and all around the Arctic, many of these domesticated wolf descendants share common characteristics: a thick double coat, the distinct fur-insulated ears, almond-shaped eyes allowing them to squint as protection from frigid winds, extra fat in their foot pads to retain warmth, and a feathered tail typically curved, which many, including the Siberian Huskies, use to retain a blanket of heat around their face while they sleep. The breeds within this type of dog took on the name Spitz, a word meaning pointed, as in her muzzle and perhaps her ears, and a tip of the schnapps glass to the Germans for that. Spitz breeds are those we usually identify with the North: Siberian Huskies, Malamutes, and Chinooks. But mysteriously enough, Josh? Other Spitz-Type breeds, such as the Chow Chow, the Pomeranian, and the Basenji, Africa's barkless dog, thrive thousands of miles from the pole. As does the Australian Dingo, another Spitz-Type, which the Australian Museum reckons came over with Asian seafarers some 4,000 years ago. Among the Yakuts, or Saka, the Turkic indigenous peoples of Siberia, came one such breed, the Yakutian Laika. Laika being a Russian word for bark, and for the Moscow stray who became the first living creature ever to travel in space. I feel an AKC breed biography coming on. Professor? A newly developed breed with an ancient history, the Yakutian Laika are dedicated multitaskers, herding, guarding, and helping fetch dinner, though their main job is transportation. Through centuries on sled teams, she's learned to work and play well with fellow dogs. She'll bark at strangers, but it's more likely an act of friendliness than one of security. She's powerful, but relative to her cousins, the Chinook or Alaskan Malamute, she's slight in size, a trait she shares with many of the so-called peasant breeds, or working dogs, raised in cultures where few bellies, human or canine, are often full. That a human family who could barely feed themselves found ways to feed a working dog, or six, tells you all you need to know about the vital importance of northern canines. Excuse me. It's a text from Avery in Norman, Oklahoma. Hey, Bud, how come we've all heard of Siberians and Samoyeds and such, but have barely heard of the Yakutian Laika? Great question, Avery. Over the years, as communication and travel opened up, the great northern breed spread south to the lower 48. But Siberia is Siberia, in many ways still remote. The story of the Yakutian Laika hasn't had a chance to spread. Time to fix that. To the archives. Here it is. This paper by Stanislav Gorodilov documents the long, sometimes turbulent history of the Yakutian Laika. He cites research suggesting that in some ancient northern cultures, the dog was a cult animal, part of rituals and sacrifices. Historically, writes Gorodilov, the people of northeastern Siberia lived along its major waterways, which fell into two distinct categories. Along rivers that teemed with fish and were level enough for sled paths, the people would make yukala, a dried fish for dogs. These coveted waterways were dog rivers. Along waterways that lacked a supply of fish and weren't level enough for a dog sled, reindeer were used for hauling. These were deer rivers. More recently, with the advent of the printing press and the rise of good old human bureaucracy, come the first recorded mentions of canines in Yakutian culture. He cites an illustration published in Amsterdam in 1692. It shows an indigenous man standing on skis, bowed upward at both ends. Across his midriff, he's holding on to a long staff with a rope or line in the middle, tied to a sleek, coated dog who's propelling him forward. Evidently, the thick fur of the northern canines was lost in translation. In 1843, a Russian author described the Yakutian Laika specifically as a necessary pet used for sledding and hunting, and that the breed was used for postal intercourse. In the 1843 page-turner, Guide to the Geography of the Russian Empire, author Ivan Pavlovsky describes the 19th century trails carved into the Siberian north, where distant outposts were linked by as many as 20 teams of Siberian Laikas. Typically, he wrote, there were 10 dogs to a team in 2 rows on a long strap, with an 11th dog leading the team. In addition to postal intercourse, they hauled loads ranging from 25 to 35 poods, running up to 80 versts a day. And by my math, that translates to hauling about half a ton more than 50 miles over some decidedly unkind terrain. With a lighter load, they might cover 140 versts, about the distance from Philadelphia to New York. A decade later, Russia's Ministry of the Interior recorded that in the Irkutsk region, there were 15,157 dogs used for sledding. Meanwhile, back in the archives. Then came the so-called Age of Discovery some 500 years ago, when Inuit communities discovered shivering Europeans tracking footprints all over the fresh snow. As European explorers set their sights on the poles, they quickly learned human technologies were little match for the tried and true efficiency of the dog sled. In the 1850s, the British captain Francis McClintock was celebrated for his innovative use of dogs in Arctic transportation, as Inuit everywhere rolled their eyes. Not all European explorers were as quick to pile on. Artist renderings of some expeditions were careful to omit dogs from their illustrations, instead showing men hauling sledges. Evidently, the use of dogs, or worse, the appearance of going native, wasn't the narrative they wanted to spread back home. Some early 20th century expeditions brought ponies to haul sledges over snow and ice, with disastrous results. Those that didn't perish from the cold were euthanized. In April 1909, when Robert Peary was the first to reach the pole.
But everyone is on the phone for you.
Did you say everyone?
Everyone.
Okay. Who was first to be credited with reaching the... who was kinda, sorta, maybe among the first to reach the pole, managed the final leg of his trip with the aid of 40 dogs pulling 5 sledges. Norwegian Roald Amundsen conquered the South Pole 3 years later. Undisputed, using Samoyeds, some 52 in all. Or as we at AKC like to think of it, a Samoyed named Ita was first to set paw on the South Pole, with Amundsen 1 sled length behind. Damn straight. It was in 1928 when a team of Chinooks helped chauffeur Admiral Richard Byrd during his first Antarctic expedition. The dogs had been bred by musher Arthur Walden, developed from German and Belgian Shepherd working dogs. They took their name from one of the earliest issue, Chinook, who led Admiral Byrd's 13-dog team. Unlike the triumphant Admiral, Chinook, the dog, never returned home. One night he wandered from the expedition's camp and was never seen again. Following Walden's death, a couple purchased the stock and moved the dogs to Maine. Over the years, the number of breedable Chinooks dipped perilously low, as few as 11 dogs by 1981. Groups of dedicated breeders set about restoring their numbers. In 2013, more than 800 Chinooks were registered. By then, sledding trails were the mighty highways of the far north, and the northern working breeds, the engines that brought life and so very often staved off death. Never more so than during the storied Serum Run. Snuggle in with a mug of cocoa. It's a great story. It begins in the far north of Cleveland, in the far north of Ohio, at the Museum of Natural History. Right over there behind glass are the preserved remains of Balto, the celebrated canine hero whose name resonates a century after he led the team that delivered life-saving medication to Nome, Alaska. Make no mistake, Balto and his team were heroes, though their top billing remains a sore point in canine history. It was the winter of 1925 when papers across America carried a disturbing report from AP.
Flash! Nome, Alaska. Nome has a diphtheria epidemic and no antitoxin. The nearest known supply is at Anchorage, 600 miles away, and must come by dog team. Several deaths have occurred. With only 1 physician and 4 nurses in town, new cases are appearing daily.
Winter ice had stopped up shipping, and the early open cockpit aircraft with their water-cooled engines were no match for the winter conditions. Nome, once a mighty gold rush center of 20,000 people, now reduced to some 1,300, was all but cut off. Hope ran thin.
Flash, Anchorage. Moving on a 400-mile snow-covered path, the fastest and most faithful dog teams in the district were on the road to Nenana, Alaska today, in a race against the advances of an epidemic of diphtheria raging at Nome. 4 deaths were reported since the outbreak yesterday. The United States Signal Corps issued a call for dog teams throughout the subarctic region, and many seasoned mushers responded.
Of all Alaskan teams and mushers, the ablest was Norwegian-born Leonard Seppala, both a champion musher and breeder of exceptional Siberian Huskies. As any Disney aficionado will tell you, the cream of the crop was his lead dog, Togo, named for the storied Japanese admiral Togo Heiichiro. Togo was a natural leader. He was relentless, intuitive, and, remarkably, 12 years old. In soccer parlance, that's stoppage time in the life of a husky. Hike! With the fresh serum delivered by steamship to Anchorage, Seppala set out from Nome, prepared for a round trip to Anchorage along a harsh trail hundreds of miles long. A route used for postal intercourse, in often whiteout conditions and temperatures reaching the ugly side of -50. In Nome, the strained medical team discovered a 5-year-old supply of antitoxin, well past its best before, and used it to slow the disease. The relief wouldn't last long.
From the local correspondent of the Associated Press, help immediately. Everything looked favorable yesterday, but today conditions have reversed. More new cases have been reported. The old antitoxin has been used up and new cases are appearing. The situation becomes serious.
The team struggled against blizzards, high winds, and ice fogs. It was Togo's team leading Seppala, who made a 42-mile return trip across the treacherous sea ice of Norton Sound. In the blinding snow, Seppala was forced to rely on Togo to navigate, which the good-natured Siberian did flawlessly before reaching a trail station and handing off their serum to the next team. While the other teams, all heroes, covered an average of 31 miles each, Togo's team and Seppala covered 261 miles. America would hear a different story.
The North Country has written on the pages of its history in large letters the name of Balto, the lead dog of Gunnar Kassen's team. Kassen today told the story of how, when he himself was no longer able to see his dogs, much less the trail, he placed his trust in Balto, and the big Siberian never faltered, but led him straight to Nome. It was Kassen who arrived Monday morning after completing the final lap of the Race for Mercy into Nome with 30,000 units of diphtheria serum.
And with that, Balto, not Togo, was the toast of the lower 48. His celebrity spread rapidly, punctuated a few days later by a frightening report.
Balto, leader of Gunnar Kassen's team of Siberian wolfhounds and canine hero in a recent relay race from Nenana to Nome, is dead, according to a report received today from Nome.
Which happily turned out not to be true.
Never mind.
Like Togo, Balto was bred in Seppala's kennel, and while both were fine dogs, it was Togo that Seppala chose for breeding. Balto was neutered. Nonetheless, Balto and a number of teammates were feted across the U.S., touring vaudeville theaters, arenas, and town halls. The AKC Gazette of January 31st, 1926, featured a picture of Balto standing beside his bronze likeness, the one admired to this day in Central Park. In his memoir, Leonard Seppala wrote,
I hope I shall never be the man to take away credit from any dog or driver who participated in that run. We all did our best. But when the country was roused to enthusiasm over the Serum Run driver, I resented the statue of Balto. For if any dog deserved special mention, it was Togo.
Though it would take decades and some benevolent Disneyfication, Togo finally got his due. Following his 1925 heroics, he lived out his 4 remaining years as a stud dog in a New England kennel. Togo, described by Seppala as the best dog that ever traveled the Alaskan Trail, died in 1929 at 16. By 1927, Balto and his team, their public glow long since faded, were reduced to appearing in dime museums, seedy storefront exhibitions of freaks and curiosities. The once magnificent canines were now malnourished and mangy. Then, as if by providence, they caught the attention of Cleveland businessman George Kimball during a Los Angeles vacation. Returning home, Kimball passed the Hamburg and in just 10 days raised $2,000. That's north of $35,000 today, much of it in pennies offered by city kids. The dogs were purchased and shipped east, where they lived out their time in comfort as mascots at Brookside Zoo. Today, more than a century after his birth, Balto is yielding new secrets. Though he and other dogs bred by Seppala are described as Siberian Huskies, a recent DNA analysis of Balto's preserved remains shows that he was only part Husky and that his ancestry also included lines of Alaskan sled dogs, village dogs, Greenland dogs, and Tibetan mastiffs. For thousands of years, nothing could separate the great northern Spitz-Type dogs from their role, wresting life from hostile polar climes. Then...
Polaris! Polaris! For family fun, a thrilling run over wide open spaces where the land is for living. Shout hooray, you're on your way. You're heading for a wide world of fun. Get a Polaris.
Make winter time a family fun time. Discover new adventures, exciting things to do, with a mechanical dog team to pull you through a sunlit winter wonderland. Break your own trails.
By the mid-20th century, they were eclipsed by new technologies, highways and ice roads, bush pilots and modern airstrips, and by snowmobiles, which became the new IT vehicle for moving people and freight and for postal intercourse. By then, dog fanciers in the lower 48 and in other less thermally challenged parts of the planet discovered the great Spitz breeds. For some breeds, such as the Yakutian Laika, numbers plummeted. For the past quarter century, groups of enthusiasts, supported by AKC's Foundation Stock Service, are working to reclaim them. Northern canines provide one of this planet's great survival stories. Since antiquity, humans have relied on them, the ancestors of Siberians and Malamutes, Chinooks and Samoyeds, Shiba Inus, from Pomeranians to Chow Chows. For tens of thousands of years, they've outlasted the worst cold, snow, and ice our planet can impose. And with their human partners, they've survived disease and depravity. More recently, many survived unemployment. But however much their roles evolve and change, their bond with humans should be good for a few thousand years more. And then some.
Down and Back, stories from the AKC archives. Visit akc.org to learn everything you could ever want to know about responsible dog ownership. Follow AKC on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at American Kennel Club. On X, at AKC Dog Lovers. And tell us what you thought of the show. If you're new to the show, subscribe with your favorite podcast provider to catch up on all of our past episodes. Founded in 1884, the not-for-profit AKC is the recognized and trusted expert in breed, health, and training information for all dogs. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. Excuse me. Shh. Research for Down and Back is provided by the AKC Library and Archives, the only national repository dedicated to the sport and enjoyment of the purebred dog. Learn more about the collections at akc.org/library.